Thanks for joining, everybody. It's afternoon here where I am. I realize it might be midday for a number of you throughout the U.S., and it seems like we got people from all over the place. So my name's Phil. We'll go ahead and we'll kind of get started here today. I've always liked these webinars that we do when we update the materials, because a lot of times it's so much work put into keeping the material current, and I really want to make sure that that is reflected in everybody's understanding of what the material is. So I see there's a lot of alumni in the group today, which is great. I see people from, I glanced real quickly. So far, it looks like I can find the coverage from, it looks like Sweden all the way to Colorado, probably a little bit further, but I didn't dig into the list. And also a lot of new folks that I don't recognize your names, so I'm glad to kind of meet you. For those of you who are not familiar with kind of where I come into the big picture here, I've been around the information security community for quite some time, and these days I split my time between two main things. My day job is with Red Canary. Got a few Red Canary coworkers in here, which is kind of nice, and we work really heavily on the endpoint, which is really fascinating, being somebody that brings a network perspective to the to the classroom, because it's fun to kind of see this mesh between network and endpoint. And I don't want anybody to ever think like one or the other is better. That's never the case. It's always more important to realize that we've got the ability to apply the strengths of each to overcome some of the shortcomings of each. So it's kind of a really cool blend. But at Red Canary, we're really kind of forging ahead on the endpoint side, and certainly seeing how that's informed by the other and vice versa. In the SANS world, I've got a couple of things that I do with the SANS group overall. I've been around with SANS for about 10 years now, and currently a senior instructor, primarily responsible for Forensics 572. I'm of course lead for 572, and I affectionately call that my third kid, because it takes a lot of time and effort, and it's definitely a labor of love that goes into building something that resonates in the community, which is why I'm really happy to see alumni back in the webcast here. And also recently took co-lead responsibilities for the overall DFIR curriculum with my very good friend and my colleague, Heather Moloch, who's the lead for our Forensics 585 class, which is the smartphone forensic class. So it's really fun to work with her and kind of with our overall team of instructors across the entire scope of the forensic space, and kind of bring the latest, greatest material to you across the board. I live here in Southern Delaware, which is home, which is where I'm broadcasting from, as I'm sure most of you are listening from home, given current circumstances. And just in general, I'm a big fan of technology. I'm fascinated to see how technology kind of permeates our life. Certainly the fact that we're all here right now, 100 and some of us in a room virtually, as it were, listening to content and kind of sharing a little bit of this information, is a testament to the fact that we've got such a pervasive technology in our lives, which is pretty fascinating. But overall, it's just something that I'm really interested in, and something that I think you are, because you're here, and I'm excited to kind of bring you a little bit of my perspective of what I've been working on for probably around the last 4 or 5 months in terms of the Forensics 572 courseware. The main things that we've updated, when I say main things, that's kind of hard because we've updated a lot. About 25% of the class has been updated. And this is, by the way, what I would consider to be a mid-grade upgrade. This is not an overhaul. This is not just tweaks and tunings, but 25% is about mid-grade. And as I'll mention a little bit later, all our SANS classes undergo that. So it's that level of currency is critical for so many reasons. I'm going to talk about each of these in turn. So rather than me list out the stuff that's on the slide, I think it's going to be a lot more exciting, a lot better to just kind of dive right in and kind of give you some perspective on exactly what we've got that's new for you. Probably the biggest thing that required the most investment of time with this revision of the course is that we are moving to electronic workbooks. This has been a long time coming. We have had literally hundreds, probably a total amongst our team, thousands of hours invested into selecting the right technology stack, testing the procedures, really stress testing a lot of our infrastructure and automating our infrastructure so we can have the most current material hit the course. And the end result is that the latest, greatest workbook will be primarily delivered through a web browser in the SIFT virtual machine that we distribute in the class. This will be, of course, limited just to course participants. This is not something we distribute outside of those confines. But this also gives us a lot of interesting opportunities. First of all, don't think the paper's going away, at least not yet. Certainly any of you who have been into a GIAC exam know that you got to bring your hard copy. So we're going to keep providing that for you, of course. But the primary delivery mechanism is that electronic one. Now, what's really cool about this, and what I'm going to show you in a minute in a demo, is that we can update the content for you dynamically. And sometimes, hey, look, I'm human. I make typo mistakes sometimes. I can't type the word "the" to save my life. It's always TEH. I don't know if you're like that, but there's just those things that I find, and after you get to production, you're like, oh, they're so embarrassing. Well, now I can update those, maybe cover my tracks a little bit. But by you updating the material in your VM means you're going to get the latest, greatest information there. So whether it's typos or maybe new tools or new approaches that are brought to mind that streamline the procedures in our technical labs, that's going to be a really, really big game changer for us, especially when you consider that about 50% of Forensics 572 is hands-on labs. So we've got 6 days of material, that's 36 contact hours of material, and about 18 of those are going to be our labs, which is a really important thing for us because we want to make sure we're showing you the practical application of a lot of the concepts that we're touching on during the more traditional, lecture kind of book style of the training. But that dynamic update does require internet connectivity, but it's all streamlined and automated. And again, I'm going to show you that in just a couple of minutes. The other nice thing is that it allows you to copy and paste your commands. So you don't have to go and type some of these more relatively intricate commands in terms of syntax if you don't want to. Now that's the key here, is that you get the decision on how you're going to apply that. Some folks that come into class are absolute command line comfortable, command line whiz, and that's great. Go for it, type the command on your own, you're welcome to do so. Others are going to be a little bit less comfortable, and if you're less comfortable, we still got you, so you can do that copy paste. Additionally, we're experimenting. You're going to see that we're innovating a lot with this because we want to make sure we're bringing you the latest, greatest content. So we've experimented with some screen recording that are embedded. We've experimented with off-site linking. So even though your browser is self-contained, the workbook is self-contained within your browser, you have the ability to now jump off to additional resources because we realize, man, the internet changes pretty quick. So we want to keep up with that. I can always point you to the latest, greatest, as long as you're doing that update. So there's a lot of new things that went into this. Like I said, major effort that took hundreds of hours of my own time, thousands of hours of our team's time to refine the process. And if I give you a little bit of insight beyond just Forensics 572, to answer what I'm sure a lot of you are thinking right now, yes, this will be sent out to, or this will be conveyed into all of our other classes. So we have Forensics 508, which is already there, and we are starting to work with all of our other forensic classes to do this workbook. And there's also some additional work that's going on across SANS to take this concept further as well. Now that all sounds great, but it's way cooler for me to show you this. So just give me 1 second here, and I'm going to change my presentation screens over to my demo system. And I'm going to show this. And if in the chat or in the questions, you should be seeing my SIFT workstation. Is that correct? You can just confirm that before I go on and give you a demo of absolutely nothing. I think we should be good. I'm going to assume so, and I'm going to move forward because sometimes these webinar interfaces are a little bit different, but I am going to change back here. All right, so go ahead, unlock it. You certainly have the standard passwords that we'll provide for you. Brings you up on the desktop, but I want to show you this electronic workbook. So we start out in a browser. It comes right in here. Again, this is all completely self-contained. This is going to be hosted here. So for those of you who don't have internet access, you're going to be in good shape. You're going to be able to see the exercises as they're available. And then you'll be able to work through those. Let me show you a couple of these. For example, if I'm going to zoom up for you here. I realize it's a little bit extreme in terms of the zoom, but I think that this will help here. We've got a question here that says, hey, what command can you run to capture this type of traffic? This is one of the beginning kind of baseline labs. So we get to be pretty advanced down the line in terms of some of the later ones. Well, you can see right in here, this is the answer, the command right there. Now, if I wanted to run that, all I do is click the copy And now I have that in the clipboard. I can now paste that over into one of my command lines if I wanted to. Again, totally optional. You don't have to do that. As we scroll down just a little bit more, let's go ahead. There's a command. There's one of these I'm looking specifically for. Here we go. Now let's use a different one. I've got a couple other ideas. What TCP dump line can accomplish, this task in particular? So you unroll this, and this is going to then say, okay, here's the command that you would use. So we're answering the question. And then we're also going to be able to give you expected results. So if you do decide you want to run this command on your own and it looks like it's not matching what you expect to see, you're going to see what should be shown, and then also you get the cross-check, but you also get the ability to see that expected result. So if you're not running it directly at the time you're reading the material, you'd at least get a feel and kind of get your footing for the what you're expecting to see during that portion of the lab. And you can see that this expands on to lots and lots of other uses. One great thing that we've added in is the ability to zoom up on images. So you get some pretty extreme zoom capability, which seems pretty simple and straightforward, but it does really pay off when you're dealing with some of these more intricate types of screenshots. Again, you're now going to be able to interact with that on your terms. You don't have to worry about the size we print them in physically in the book, etc. Really gives you the best of both worlds. I also wanted to show you the update. Now, literally, we made this about as easy as we possibly could. We basically gave you a command alias to do this. All you run is literally the command workbook update. Now, I'm internet connected here. This is going to reach out to our servers that we've configured. We've updated the files. And at this point, as soon as you reload in that browser, you're getting the new content. And this was especially helpful when we started wanting to try and experiment with some new features and kind of say, oh, hey, here's a YouTube video that's pretty interesting. Bounce you out to there. Or here's something we can embed in the content that makes that a little bit clearer in terms of the wording and the phrasing that we put in there. So lots of great options there for us to include. But that's the electronic workbook. There's so much other stuff that's in here that you really have to see to understand it or to appreciate. But we really are excited about this, and hope that that's something you'll be able to take advantage of soon, either in 572 or in one of our other DFR classes. I need to go put my other screen back on presenter, so give me just a moment here. Still optimizing my broadcast environment for our online classes, so things are a little bit spread out, but that's okay. But that's the electronic workbooks. Let's talk about some of the other things we've got for you. And I also want to reiterate, if you do have any questions, please feel free to type those into the questions box on your GoToWebinar control panel. I'll see those. I'll have a chance to answer them now or potentially toward the end, depending on how much time we have left. First thing that we're looking at is we have really shifted most of our evidence into JSON format. JSON, JavaScript object notation, is a syntax that's really becoming very favorable for a lot of our tools, not just in forensics, but for anybody that's worked in any of, for example, the cloud environments. You know that a lot of the logs you get out of there are going to come in that JSON format as well. So we decided to double down on that. We focused on that for all of our major log components. The parsing of this is done with a tool called JQ, and the syntax for this can be very, very elaborate, or it can be really straightforward and simple, depending on the level of detail that you need to get out of your JSON data. The syntax you typically see is that we have these key value pairs. So in this case, the key in these Zeek logs is TS, standing for timestamp. And then the value that shows right here is, of course, that human readable value. Over here, we've got something called a query, another field with the value that shows up there as well. You can restructure and format and build or tear down or combine lots of different stuff within JSON format content, all with JQ. And we also in the class talk a little bit about a site that you can actually go to right now. It's not something I run, it's a public resource called JQ Play. And JQ Play is basically this JQ tool in an online format. So it's a real nice way for you to go and experiment with appropriately sanitized log data in JSON format, kind of get a feel for how JQ can streamline and automate a lot of the processing that you would normally like to do there. So lots of JSON all over where we can. Some of it is generated in the class based on Python scripts and other utilities. Some of that is going to be built based on existing tools, like I'd mentioned before, Zeek, which we're showing the DNS logs out of Zeek right here. We have a new lab as well, brand new labs, in fact. The first one is going to be involving those JSON logs coming from Zeek, specifically looking at DNS logs. We've set up an infrastructure to model several attack scenarios and do some forensic level collection of that data, of those events. And we basically generated in the vicinity of 640, I think, 1,000 DNS queries and results. And we gave you the information from that. We gave you the DNS logs. And through the lab that we've created, you'll be using both JQ and a transparent stream-based decompressor called zgrep in order to search that JSON. And we're going to kind of play with the speed of that, the performance impact, because what we found is that JQ is fantastic, but for certain things, it's very slow. We're actually able to get 80% plus speed ups by going with zgrep and then applying JQ transforms. So we're going to really try to stress for you getting to what I like to call good findings fast, which means we're getting you to accurate results that are repeatable. There's the good portion of the findings. But we don't want that to take a ridiculous amount of time, because although it might take you a minute or 2 minutes to run one query, if you need to run that query 40 or 50 times, now you're adding up to a lot of time spent before we get to any results. So the more we can squeeze out of our clocks, so to speak, the better off we'll be. This lab, though, has 3 different activities. One of them is doing profiling of our environment, and this is going to be identifying the most heavily queried host names out of that 600,000 record data set. And then we're also going to be talking about finding fast flux architectures based on low TTL values in DNS, as well as the rapidly and widely disparate IP addresses that are typically seen in fast flux. And then we'll also talk about DGAs, where we see hundreds or thousands of unsuccessful lookups for DNS names, followed by that one that's the gold nugget. That's going to be the one that's correct, that returns a result, which certainly gives us indication that that DGA was successful. So we've got all that baked into one lab. So that's that took a long time to put together, but it's been a really exciting one and been received very well so far. Our second new lab also involves JQ, coincidentally. This is going to actually be doing profiling for TLS clients. What you may have heard of, because it's become pretty popular lately, is that there is something called a JA3 hash. It's a fingerprint of a TLS client library. Well, in the class, we've always talked about fingerprinting TLS clients based on the values that go into this JA3 hash. And in this brand new lab, we pulled about 200,000 TLS negotiation events out of a sample data set. And then we went ahead and generated Zeek logs for you to go through. In that, you're going to find those hashes, profiling the environment once again. You're also going to be doing direct lookups, which says this JA3 hash is consistent with the TLS libraries in a certain version of Firefox versus a certain version of Chrome, for example. And this is something we've been doing for some time in the community, but now we've got this lab that reconstructs that in a very, very realistic scenario. So you're building the skills to provide that functionality. And I'll also give great thanks to a free utility. It's a free website actually called ja3er.com. It's a screenshot of them on the right-hand side there. It's a place where you're able to paste in your JA3 fingerprint or the hash value, and then it identifies, if known, what that hash value consists with. And we actually have an offline copy of that embedded into your SIFT VM, and that SIFT VM will then allow you to do that query locally without any operational security risk by pasting that into a site. Not that ja3er.com isn't reputable, it is just a general risk, and it's a good guideline to not send that information out to the internet. This lab also has you pulling out subject names out of suspect JA3 negotiations, so you're able to find the potential for a malicious activity based on the frequency with which you see that JA3 hash, then trace it back to the negotiation parameters. What host name is being asked for by that client library, and does that match with what's normal? All of that's going to be really important in a real world environment, and we model that very closely in our lab as well. And then lastly, we also have the opportunity to do full certificate extraction, because if you've ever looked at TLS negotiations, you know that there are, easily 100+ different fields in a certificate. We tell you which ones are going to be most useful, most relevant, maybe which ones are going to be the best threat intelligence or the best indicators of compromise, depending on your role and your respective organizations. And then we'll also let you extract that out so you can do the more detailed, long-term kind of deep dive into that particular certificate when it's extracted. So that's going to be baked into one of our labs that happens on day 5 of the class. Next thing that's up, really fascinating one for me anyway. There's a company called Corelight. They're actually the corporate resources behind the Zeek platform for network security monitoring. And the team there developed something called a community ID. And there's within the network forensic and network operations community, it's kind of become the new hotness in terms of uniquely identifying a pattern or a communication path rather. One of the challenges we've had in the past is that NetFlow is inherently unidirectional, so it became something we had to stitch together visually to say these two flow summaries suggest they're part of the same communication. Well, the team at Corelight has taken the lead to go ahead and commoditize the summary of communications into a bidirectional indicator. Now, these aren't really designed to be human readable, but they are unique enough that we can take advantage of them in a variety of different tools. That multi-tool component is the key here, because up until the community ID, you might have a session identifier or a connection identifier in Zeek, and that doesn't mean anything to Moloch. That doesn't mean anything to your Cisco infrastructure. That doesn't mean anything to your Plixer infrastructure, QRadar, or whatever your SIM might be. None of that matters, because everybody used their different way of categorizing a connection. Now we've got this common one, and it is not patent encumbered, it is not proprietary, it is free and open, and the Corelight company actually wants other people to use this as well. A couple of examples you see here, I've got a few different tools. You can generate these community ID values using this simple Python script, which we do include in your VMs, your SIFT virtual machines. And all this is going to do is take any input PCAP file, and as you can see here, it prints out the pipe separated fields. First up is a timestamp, looks like a Unix time with microseconds. Second is that community ID, which is a version colon and then a base 64 string. And that base 64 encoded string is nothing more than a packed version, so binary version of each of the source and destination IP addresses, as well as the layer 4 protocol. So in this case, we're looking at TCP, protocol 6, and then at the very end, the source and the destination ports. The algorithm sorts and orders those values in a way that ensures that they're the same in each direction, which then of course results in the same community ID value for both the client to server and then the server to client back. This hex value can then be represented across all different platforms from a monitoring perspective, and then you're able to do that search. So for example, we have what appear to be the command channel of an FTP session and maybe one of its data channels. And I'll be honest, the only way that I know it's one of those data channels is because we created the PCAP file, and I've gone through that file that generated that. But if we take those values, we can actually pivot into other utilities. Here is Zeek's connection log. So here we see that I'm searching for those same community ID values. We're getting the same 2 records, in this case showing up as the reformatted JSON objects that you see here. And then lastly, another tool that we use very heavily in the class, Moloch, has the same fields that are auto-generated. So that means you're able to search based on community ID values, or potentially provide profiling in terms of when those sessions are active in one of the environments that you might be looking at. So it's an excellent way for you to look across many, many tools and to kind of pivot uniformly across that one session. So that's something that we have added in, and we've taken advantage of in many of our labs. So what else we got besides individual technologies? Well, we've got brand new VMs. I showed you the Ubuntu Linux SIFT VM. This is a customized version. that is built specifically with tools that we use in class. So it is a slight fork from what you get from the community distribution. But the big things are going to be, of course, the course-specific embedded workbook, that electronic workbook, again, big game changer. We've also included a locally hosted CyberChef instance. Now, if you're not familiar with CyberChef, you should Google this. If you are familiar with it, you're already excited about the fact that we've got that embedded in. CyberChef is a free and open source tool that is put out by the British GCHQ, and it is a platform that allows you, at last count, several hundred different ways of encoding or decoding or segmenting, splitting, joining, reformatting data. They kind of tout this as the Swiss Army knife for your data. And we've built that directly into your SIFT VMs. The reason I did this is so you don't have to rely again on somebody's off-platform, internet-facing type of a platform, because you may not want to paste your case data there. In fact, we talk on day 5 in class about why you don't want that to happen, why operational security comes into to your level of importance. So suffice to say, this was a big VM, and I'd give tremendous credit to a large chunk of our SANS team who does the baseline capabilities with our SIFT VMs. And that gives the authors, such as myself, the ability to take that baseline and then customize it out as needed. So we kind of take the stock, customize, tune, tweak, test it with the rest of our team, and then we go ahead and push that out to the students through the USBs. Lots of updated tools. Anytime we respin one of our VMs, we always make sure we're on the latest and greatest we possibly can be. Wireshark, NFDump, which is a command line utility we leverage for NetFlow, as well as Zeek, looking at the 3.01 version, if I remember correctly, embedded into the system. And then we've added on some new cool tools as well. An SMB timelining tool, which actually came out of our European DFIR summit this last year, as well as JQ, which I've talked about before. So lots of stuff is embedded in that. And it's all self-contained as a VM that you can just fire up, start using, and it's matched directly to all of your lab material. We have 3 VMs in class. All 3 of them are updated. The second of which is SOF-ELK. This is actually a project that I maintain, and it takes the standard Elastic Stack componentry and builds it into an appliance. Of course, if you're familiar with Elastic Stack, you know big data, large-scale evidence collection, and maintenance, very fast searching, and what I would very, very politely refer to as ridiculous scalability. And I mean that as the highest compliment, of course. You have the ability to take Elastic Stack, build it into a clustered infrastructure, and see this scale up to tens of billions of records, and that's billion with a B. That's a lot. Now, our VM, I will be very honest, we cannot scale to billions of records. I have personally tested it to somewhere in the vicinity of around 500 million records though. And if I had more hardware, I could probably throw at it maybe some more cluster nodes. We could probably increase that as well. But SOF-ELK is something that is not only for Forensics 572, we also use it in several other SANS courses, and it is a public resource as well. And this is something SANS believes in very strongly. If you go to sans.org/free, F-R-E-E, you're going to get a giant list of all of the free resources, including SIFT, SOF-ELK, some of the other platforms out there that SANS directly supports or helps to bring out to the public. And if I'm giving you just a little bit of kind of future-looking information, a little prediction here, I've got a brand new version of SOF-ELK in the public fork. It's in final testing right now. I've got a few folks who are putting it through the tests and putting it through the ringer to make sure it's ready for you. And this is going to be available later this week. So watch our SANS Forensics Twitter account, watch my SOF-ELK Twitter account as well. We'll give you a good heads up. We'll make it very clear. New version, go forth, grab it, download, very, very widely. In terms of what the specific updates are, not only have we increased the Elastic Stack version itself, the course version takes us to 7.5. The one that I'm going to get you later this week goes to 7.6. We've updated the dashboards, completely rebuilt from scratch in order to take advantage of the new functionality in 7.5 and 7.6. We've also added on several log parsers and the ability to continue updating the VM after you download it. What I mean by that is the VM is pre-configured with internet access, of course,
to go look at my GitHub account and then see that there are updates available, tell you right on login, hey, there's updates, run this command. And when you do, it's going to reach out to GitHub, pull down the updates, apply all the updates, and then you're in business with the latest and greatest. So sometimes it's going to require a new download. The one later this week is a major complete overhaul, so you will have to re-download that one, but sometimes that's unavoidable. And the other big update that took some time to put into play here is that the NetFlow components do now have full support for NetFlow version 9 and for IPFix. And we also have IPv6 support. So that's a big, big improvement, something that it was a long time coming. I'm glad to bring that out. And again, new version in the course, and I'm going to get that new version out for all of you, regardless of whether you take the course, by the end of the week here. Final testing underway, and I think you're going to really get a kick out of it. The idea here is I want this to be an elastic stack appliance. Download it, turn it on, feed it any of the several, close to 100 logs that we handle, and then you'll be able to start searching it very quickly. It's not going to be able to parse everything, but we certainly are an open source project and eager to collaborate with people in the community who write new parsers who are then going to be able to improve the overall tool. And as a free and open source tool, of course, everybody benefits from that. So again, the idea is large scale log reader and large scale analysis platform. Load the logs, it parses and extracts all that it can from them, and then it gives you a chance to use a variety of dashboards to look at that. And the third of 3 VMs, which is updated, is going to be Moloch. And if you're not familiar with Moloch, it is a tool that's written by and maintained by Verizon Media Group, but it is a free and open source platform as well. It's been underdeveloped for many years, very, very well refined. They actually have a team of developers that they pay to support the creation and maintenance of the tool. And Moloch is really designed as this large scale full packet capture and full packet analysis platform. So a lot of organizations will use Moloch as their full packet capture system. I've seen installations that range into the petabytes of PCAP, for example. And if you've ever worked with that level of data, you know that petabytes is not an easy ask. That's a lot of engineering, but it handles it quite well. It also backs up into Elasticsearch because all of the data that it sees and that it pulls out gets loaded back into that very scalable Elasticsearch backend for really, really quick searching. Latest updates to Moloch that we're taking advantage of. We've got a couple of new parsers that are in there that we're exploring, so new protocols that can be handled. And then we have this feature that I was ecstatic that they announced, which is going to be this, it's called their hunt feature, and it's a way that you can search raw packet content. So as long as you've got the PCAP, you could run this over that PCAP in the background, and you can see that it just sits there kind of as one of these queued jobs. And when it finds matching sessions for whatever string or bytes you're looking for, it's going to go ahead and assign this hunt ID value. So it kind of, think of this as like tagging a session. So the session is now going to say, oh, that hunt ID, whatever it's named, is going to match this session. So now I can search by that match. And there's actually a couple of other search parameters that are probably a little more human readable that you can use, but that's kind of the machine parsable API driven example. Great way for you to do that searching across large amounts of PCAP data if you don't have a knowledge of exactly what field you're looking in or things like that. So Moloch, we've got a full lab dedicated to it. And then, of course, with a lot of our other labs, you can leverage this as well, just to kind of get a feel for how the full packet capture approach can be helpful, even if you have an extremely large amount of data to look at. Some of the other updates that we've got, we have a poster that we put out to correspond to the course, and I'm excited to say that your follow-up email that you're going to get from this webinar will direct you to our poster, and I've got a new version that I will be approving for you later today. So when that comes in, keep an eye on it. We'll also put this out on our social media and such, but this is going to include kind of like a high-level overview to a lot of our tools. You can see that our toolbox on the back includes lots of tools, command line examples, use cases, command line parameter explanation, for example. Then we also have some forensic use cases, such as how to build profiles or what kind of forensic processing workflows we recommend for most network-centric type questioning. So whatever your network-enabled or network-centric case is, that'll make sure that you're attacking that in the most efficient, most effective means possible. And in terms of some of the other changes, boy, I'm pretty sure every single person on here has a very different idea of what normal life is on a daily basis than we did just maybe 2 or 3 months ago, maybe for some of you a couple of weeks ago. In case you hadn't noticed, SANS has very, very aggressively converted to the cybercast mode of delivery. World events have driven us and basically told us we need to go virtual, and we did. And I mentioned it in the slide earlier, but I didn't put it in the voice track. You've got a team of, and I'm not exaggerating here, hundreds of people at SANS who are working to continue to deliver the best possible training we can to you, despite the fact that we are now all confined to our homes. Within 100 hours, we converted every single one of our training events up until the end of May at this point into these cybercast virtual events. I got to work with your entire team of over 200 instructors across the SANS spectrum in making sure that they are ready to support, that we have the technology to support you. You see I got my fancy microphone sitting here. This is because I basically had to build a broadcast chamber here in my office in the home. And a lot of your other instructors have done exactly the same thing. We've shared notes, we've shared best practices, and we are absolutely ready to rock that. I just gave a cybercast to a group last week, and it's a little different. In some ways, I'll be honest, I like it a bit better. In other ways, it's a little bit challenging. Like, I'm sorry, I can't deliver you snack food or ice cream on day 5 through cybercast, but you're welcome to have ice cream every day if you'd like, if you put it in your own freezer. I guess that's the upside. But the idea here is that we recognize that the attackers don't stop. We can't either. There's a lot of time on your hands now, maybe. If you're fortunate enough to jump into one of our classes, we're very eager to basically keep you up to date and keep you moving forward. You get the same instructors, you get the same courseware, you get to wear pajamas to class, which depending on where you take a live event someday, you might not want to do that. So the bottom line is you get to do this on your own time. You get to do this, certainly at your own schedule for the most part, but you still have the live component. And I say you can do it on your own schedule because when you do a cybercast, you get a video recording of your course, your exact course that you're using, and you get that for 4 months. So whatever you take, you get that recording. You also get the MP3s. Everybody gets the MP3s, regardless of how you take our courses. That is not necessarily for your course. In the case of cybercast, you get your own recording. We've also really tried to start innovating around this to make this the best possible experience for you. Your instructor will share their microphone and their slides and their webcam, basically just like we are right now. Sometimes that'll be all the time webcam, maybe depending on bandwidth, that'll be occasional. It's up to the instructor, but they basically got this set up and it's pretty similar to what you're seeing here. What we have added on to the cybercast that you don't have here in the webinar type of an interface is we've also given a Slack workspace. And I know a lot of you are familiar with Slack, so we created a student-facing Slack workspace that will allow you to have real-time chat with your classmates in the virtual classroom as well as your instructor. And I'll tell you, I've been watching all of our other instructors' Slack workspaces that they've been running during the week, and they're awesome. I may even try to replicate this in live classes. It's that big a deal because I'm seeing questions in real time. And certainly sometimes when you're in class, like raising your hand, waiting for a question, having a discussion, that's a little awkward. I get that. But if you put that in the chat and your instructor sees it, they know, go answer that question later. The instructor can share links and text information and make sure that they're following up with you. And I also want to mention that all of our classes, you're getting the benefit of an in-class moderator who's going to help vector you to the answers to any questions that you might have, whether that's going to be SANS people proper in terms of like GAC questions or adding an on-demand bundle, or whether you need to be vectored back to the instructor for a technical assist. And our instructors are all working out ways that they can do a one-on-one tech assist with students that need that through a screen share. So I don't want you to think that this cybercast modality, as we call it, this model of delivery is in any way less. In some cases, I got to be honest, I actually see this as a more beneficial way of consuming that material. And we're continuing to try and evaluate that, the best way to do this for you. I put this link up here because as of about an hour and a half ago, SANS has put this questionnaire out, and I would really encourage you, if you're considering a cybercast, to please go check this out. This is in the SANS Institute Twitter account. A bunch of us have retweeted it lately as well. But it's a 2-question questionnaire. No name, no nothing asked, no email. It's literally just, how do you want to consume cybercast? How do you think it's best? Because we also recognize that our traditional model of a 9-to-5 style of training, it may not work at this point. And we got a couple more weeks, a couple more months maybe, of trying to figure out how to continue delivering this through cybercast and to do that in the best way possible. So we're considering, what if we did, instead of all day for 6 days, every half a day for 12 days? What if we did this just a couple of days a week, or you know, alter the time schedule of maybe do it in the evenings versus doing it during the day? Sky's the limit here. We're really interested in your feedback. So I would make a personal plea for you to please, this URL that I've got shortened on the screen takes you to that tweet. Fill that questionnaire out, let us know, because we're really open to your requirements, your needs right now, in order to best address your training needs. And please do let us know what you think of that. And also reach out to other people who have taken the cybercasts already. Look for the SANS cybercast hashtag on Twitter, and you're going to see a lot of people that were, in some cases, very hesitant about an online training delivery. And by the end of the class, they were gung-ho. And we're getting a lot of people who are becoming online training fans, not just out of necessity, but because you got instructors that are absolutely busting their tails to make sure that you get every ounce of value out of an online delivery that you would in person. So please do consider that. I'd love to see you in a virtual classroom. I know a lot of our other instructors would as well, not just for 572, but all our classes. We are really working hard to bring this to you, because it's strange times out there, right? We realize the bad guys are going to try to take advantage of that, and we need to be ready for them. So we can't really let our guard down. Well, that's actually the end of what I've got for you here. If you have questions, please do put them in the questions section. I'll be able to stick around and answer those for you. Usually like to leave just about 10-15 minutes for those questions, especially with as many people as we've got in here from as far around the world as it looks like we've got people coming in from, based on some of the folks that I know in here. If nothing else, I appreciate your time here today, delivering a little bit to you about what we have, what we've been working on within the course. Now, whether the course comes from me or one of our other instructors, they are absolutely 100% queued up and ready to rock for you. Don't hesitate to check out what we have available. The link that I have here does take you to what our current offerings are, and as we get your feedback, like through that tweet that I mentioned, we may see some things change on that. So we're very dynamic in that regard. Just stay tuned. Jessica's asked me to remind you, as we put in the chat here, this recording will be available, and so will the slides. You'll basically get that on the registration page. You're going to get a follow-up email after this, pointing you to that, as well as to the new version of the poster. Don't forget to check out sans.org/free, FREE, to get all kinds of tools that you don't need anything in order to download and start working on. And those are all tools, resources, and other materials put together by our instructor corps, who are right at the keyboard with you, and certainly willing to help you out the best we can. All right, unlock the questions panel. So I've got the questions panel unlocked here. If there are any questions, go ahead and type those. Oh, wait a minute. Holy cow. It's not showing. Hang on a second. Go to training is angering me. I popped it out and I didn't see any in there. I am so sorry that there were questions in there that I did not see. I had to lock it back in and pull it out. There's several questions. I got some time. So let me go ahead and try and work down there. Favorite Lego set? That's a tough one. The ones that I've got up behind here are the Skylines. My rule is that I only buy the Skyline sets for cities where I've been able to travel. So that's kind of a fun one. In terms of complexity, I will admit I kind of threw caution to the wind, and I built the big Millennium Falcon. That was a challenge. It took me like a year. So that was one of them that I'd say, but that's a good question. Let's see what else we got. People coming in from Portugal. Spent some time with my wife for our anniversary this last year. We were in both Lisbon as well as in Porto. Loved it. Really enjoyed seeing that your country. As you renew your GNFA, can you request electronic copies only, Christina? Unfortunately, the answer to that is no. The way that that'll work is they'll still send you the books. I don't know exactly how GIAC does that. So that SANS and GIAC, although we're related, we're two very separate entities. That would be a question that you'd have to ask GIAC to know exactly how they're managing it. That would be info@giac.org though. Good question. Okay, good. Let's see, that one's already answered. Could command line details also break down what the parts of the command do? Ooh, yeah, Jason, you mentioned explainshell.com. That's an interesting idea. I've not considered it until about 18 seconds ago when I saw your question, but I have some ideas on that, and I'm gonna have to follow back up on you with that. Jason's actually a colleague at Red Canary, so I know that I can get you back on Slack, but if there is something that we can do on that front, one of the cool things about that electronic workbook is that I'd be able to retrofit that in as well. I'm interested. My wheels are turning on that, so hold that thought, and maybe that's something else we can potentially do. Is the courseware release shipping now? Excellent question, Robert. Yes, the answer is 100% yes, it is. All courses going from this point forward in Cybercast, or when we eventually return to our live event modality, are going to be the new version, and On Demand is now using this version. So one of the things, I'm glad you mentioned this because I forgot to note this earlier. With our on-demand classes, I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to go into the SANS TV studio, which yes, exists, and actually record bits of material that get interspersed with the audio recordings. So when you take an online course for 572, you get a combination of seeing slides, the books, the audio, as well as you get the interspersed video segments. So I think we filmed about maybe 9 hours of professional video that gets spliced into that. So that's one cool thing. The other thing On Demand is going to give you is you get in progress quizzes. We actually have a whole team of people that write those quiz questions for you, just kind of like checkpoints, making sure that you're where you said you or where you'd like to be in terms of knowledge of the material. But that is all this brand new version. So as of this point forward, that's going to be what you get. Underlying tech for the electronic workbook. I could answer that in a very long way, but for right now, we're basing everything on something called MK Docs, which is a static site generator. That's the part that we've used for the instructor and author facing stuff. The student facing stuff that actually delivers the material down into your workbook is still using MK Docs, but there's a lot of custom plumbing, as I like to call it, that allows that to automatically make that available for you and your VMs. So it is a bit of a combination. Will former students have access to the VMs? So because the VMs are locked to the versions of class, you will be able to get the new SOF-ELK because it's a public resource, and you're also able to get the new version of the community SIFT because that's also a public resource. But the way SANS has put their USBs together, we actually lock those to USB. So you get the majority of those resources. And if you've taken the course already, I see you said you took it in December. What you can actually do is, I've got this documented in your text, you can refer back to it as well. In the user, local, USR, local, FOR572 directory are all the customizations that I've made. So you can get a feel for what those customizations were in your version and then try to see if any of those are worthwhile to port forward. I'll also say we're trying to take as many of our customizations that we make for 572 and get them into the main line as best as we can. So we're trying to expand that to a wider audience. It's an ongoing process, so stay tuned, especially to the SIFT project for news on that front. Oh yes, Ahmed, you mentioned that OS Query also uses the community ID, which can be correlated across Zeek. It can be correlated against Moloch. And although I haven't looked at this yet, if you haven't seen, Zeek actually just released an endpoint agent for Mac OS and for Linux. It's so new, I haven't had time to test it out. It's like literally, I think yesterday it was released, but these days I have no concept of time. I'm kind of sure you're the same way. But suffice to say that that is a very widespread tool. So yeah, the community ID there. Excellent, excellent. All right. Ooh, the command line URL that we briefly mentioned. Oh yeah, sure thing. I will. So I'm glad you mentioned that, Gerald. Asking about the command line URL, it's actually the JQ play command. I will tell you what, I'm going to write myself a note right now. Anybody who's taken the course knows that I heavily rely on the Evernote notebook. It's basically just an open notebook that you can use. I should have included that resource here, but if you just go to FOR572.com, you'll see the homepage, and one of the links on there is the notebook, and I will add JQ play to the Evernote book, Gerald. I'll do that as soon as we wrap up here, and I'll include a little bit of context on that. That's a great idea for getting that information out. How long will the current 572-508 day 6 challenge be used? Good one. Let me give a little background before I answer it though. For those who have taken either of those two courses, 508, which is Enterprise Windows Forensics, or 572, of course, with us, you know that our day 6 challenge it's a hefty beast. We ran about 2 years worth of evidence collection and active operations in a simulated enterprise environment, as well as an attack, and then we pulled the collection for it. Generated about 8 terabytes of evidence. We've got about 120 gigs of the network data in 572 and about 120 gigs of distilled data down in 508. That challenge, how long will it be used? As long as it's relevant, we'll put it that way. We want to make sure that all of our source data is up to date and relevant and accurate and reflects a real world environment. But it takes us at least 2 years to build, run, and then compromise an environment, we of course want to make sure we've literally and figuratively get our money's worth. So in terms of how long that will be used, I don't right now have a date that we're planning to run a new attack, but if I'm looking a little bit forward, we have a class called Forensics 608 that is on its way out. That's going to be in the not just Windows Enterprise, but the full enterprise worth of forensics. That's going to kind of be a mesh between 508 and 572. We also have Forensics 509, which is going to be cloud forensics. We have a 308 class, which is going to be some of the forensic and incident response, kind of the fundamentals, if you will, at a 300 level as well. So we've got a lot of those that are coming out soon. 608 uses the same environment as we do on day 6. It's just going to be a later variant. So the saga continues, I guess you would say. Good question. We try to get at least a handful of years out of each of those. We want to engineer as much durability into those as we can. Let's see, answered most of those. All right. Oh, there's Christina, I'm so glad that I saw this one. It was hidden in between 2 other questions and I clicked past you. This looks like the last one, unless you have any additionals. How will Cybercast affect those who need to take courses via work-study programs? All of our Cybercast classes will have a moderator. Please do get in touch with the work-study coordinators to see how that all works. But our idea is that we need to have the support of people in the classes. So reaching out to the SANS work study team will get you connected with all the folks that'll be able to answer that. Our goal is to make sure that we try to continue that as long as we can. And even though we're remote, we still have a need for the assistance that we get from our moderator team, which are, you know, our facilitators in the classroom are equivalent to the moderators, but they'll be able to provide that answer for you. Oh, and another one came in too. This is a good one to end on, actually. Unless there's more that come in, we can stick around a little while longer. Let's see. What would be my go-to resources for keeping on top of stuff within this community? Any specific resources that I'd recommend? Man, I'll tell you, that's an excellent question. And I really wish I had a concise list, like a nice curated feed that says, just go look here. I do struggle with keeping up with that as well. You know, like I mentioned with Zeke's new stuff that came out earlier this week, it's like, oh, game changer. You know, in terms of new stuff coming out of Elastic, which seems like they release every other week or something like that. It is tough to keep up with. I tend to find that I've got a number of people on Twitter in particular who are kind of like my bell ringers, if you will. I tend to find that they have, you know, good insight and good curation of resources. So I will, you know, kind of keep an eye on what they say. And when they say, hey, this is cool, it means I should be paying attention to it. So that's the kind of thing that we're trying to, that I try to keep in touch with. In terms of other stuff, you know, I'll be honest, I do to a large degree depend on Google News to tell me what I need to know. And I realize that's probably not the best answer overall, but as combining that along with some of those curated resources, specifically looking on Twitter, I tend to find that's fairly reliable. And then just a good team of colleagues who are up on it and kind of keeping track of folks as well. So anyway, oh, Gerald brings out the silver lining in my potential drawback on Cybercast, which is, you know, if you know, for remote classes, one of my mantras that I like, which actually when I'm done here, I'm going to go jump on the treadmill because I need to, is calories burned equals calories earned. And you know, for people who don't want to who don't follow that one, this is probably a good thing. Kind of maybe focusing our attention a little bit more on the you know, on the healthier side of things as best as you're able. Well, that actually ends up the questions that we've got, and we're pretty much right on time. I love when that happens. If you do think of any additionals, I'm going to go off camera, but I'll still stick around for a few moments here as we're kind of finishing out. Hey, once again, I appreciate you taking some time here with me. You know, we are committed to bringing you the training both in 572 as well as across the board that hits the mark, that is something that resonates with your casework. And if you're fortunate enough to be able to still bring some new stuff on with regard to the you know, the changing delivery of materials and stuff, you know, we're glad to have you and we're eager to try and support. So that said, if there's any other questions that come in, I saw a couple of things just pop up out of the corner of my eye. I'll answer those via text in just a few moments, but thank you again. Be safe out there. Please, you know, stay isolated. I really can't underscore that nearly enough. I've got a lot of friends in the healthcare industry who will appreciate you sticking to that and really giving them a fighting chance against all this. That said, I know we've got to kind of lead out. I believe, you know, we'll have Jessica go ahead and do that real quick. Thanks again. Look forward to seeing you in class sometime, and have a great afternoon, everybody. Jessica.